Have you ever wondered why breakfast is the most important meal of the day? Why that became a thing? Hey, everybody, Dr. Mark Shankman back with you, and we're on the Obesity Project, episode 9. Today, we're talking about manufacturing cravings and the hidden agenda of big food companies. So, this one really gets my britches in a bunch, so to speak. This topic, when I read on it, did some research into it, just makes me crazy, and it should make you crazy too. So, have you ever wondered why breakfast is the most important meal of the day? Why that became a thing? And you can see the picture behind me. If I kind of move around a little bit, you see how breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And um, this was actually something that was completely manufactured. It was a marketing slogan, and that's really where it came from. Had no basis in science, had no facts to back it up. Simply was companies like General Mills and Kellogg's and other companies trying to sell breakfast cereal to the masses, and they came up with this slogan called, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's utter nonsense. But so let's talk a little bit about the snack food revolution and how big business or big food companies really started to push new types of foods. And so snacking wasn't always normal. It was manufactured. And before the 1970s, it was pretty commonplace for people to eat 3 meals a day. And if you talk to your grandparents before the 1970s, before, as I mentioned yesterday, the advent of the food pyramid and the daily recommendations made by the government on how to eat and what the diet should be, the recommendation was you eat breakfast, you eat lunch, and you eat dinner. And snacks were really pretty heavily dissuaded. You were very strongly told not to eat snacks because it would ruin your appetite for your meal. And people heard this all the time. I remember growing up, I grew up back in the 70s and 80s. I remember hearing all the time that you weren't supposed to eat a snack because it would ruin your dinner. Let's say you came home from school and you were hungry and your parents told you, no, we're not going to give you a snack because it's going to ruin dinner. Well, then big food flooded the market with this concept of highly processed, sugar-laden snacks. And it was basically pushed on us, and there was no science behind it. But the thinking at the time was, well, if you eat smaller meals more frequently, you'll actually lose weight. I mean, as ridiculous and as asinine as that sounds now, the belief was if you ate smaller meals more often, you would actually decrease your total amount of calorie intake. And we know now that that's complete and utter nonsense. And it's totally uh, bypassing or overlooking the fact that the obesity problem is a hormonal issue, not a calorie issue. So snack foods that were created during the late 70s, after 77, um, in the late 70s and 80s, were hyper palatable and highly addictive. And the reason that they are is because they were highly processed, highly refined. And so you have to think about this. I may have mentioned this in a previous video. I don't remember if I did. But when you take a food source and you process it or you refine it, what you're doing is you're stripping out all the protein, stripping out all the fat, stripping out the fiber, and now you're taking something that actually had some benefit in its whole food form, and you're actually destroying a lot of the aspects of that food. So let's say that you take wheat and you strip out all the fiber, you strip out all the wheat germ and the protein and the fat, and now you've got a highly concentrated carbohydrate, And now you smash that wheat into a finely ground powder called flour. And now you take that flour and you make stuff out of it into these super snacks. And now you have a highly processed, highly refined source of carbohydrate that gets absorbed almost immediately when it hits your gut. Now, one of the things that all that fiber, that protein, and that fat that was in the whole food did was it gave you a feeling of satiation, and it slowed down the process of being digested, and it creates especially the fiber in the food created some expansion of the stomach, and that stretch on the stomach triggers certain hormones to create satiation or create a feeling of fullness. And so with all of that stripped out, now you don't feel full after you eat these things, and you want to eat more and more because they're hyper palatable and they're hyper addictive. But you also absorb that glucose, which is the end product of any starch or any carbohydrate. Um, you rapidly absorb that glucose, and you get these massive glucose spikes in your bloodstream. And eating more frequently doesn't decrease the total number of calories that you're taking in. If anything, especially eating these types of refined foods, make you more hungry, really stimulates your appetite, and you actually wind up eating more calories than less calories in a day. So you have to remember this was big food and a snack industry that was created that's well over $100 billion machine. So let's talk about big food's influence on health organizations and doctors. And this one breaks my heart, and honestly does. When you look at this, you have to follow the source of the money. So many trusted health organizations like the American Heart Association, uh, the um, the American Medical Association, all receive funding from food giants. And these sponsorships directly influences dietary guidelines that were put forth in the late 70s. And they were pushing a low fat, high carbohydrate diet. Now, they weren't necessarily pushing high carbs. They were pushing low fat. And when you talk about low fat, that essentially, it's hard to eat a lot of proteins. So a low fat diet by sort of implication causes you to eat more high carbs. So there was this sort of medical community belief that fat was actually the enemy. And this was born of an increasing rate of heart attacks in the 70s. And so they started to look at this, and they kind of developed this idea, completely erroneous, that fat was the enemy, that dietary fat was what was causing all of these heart attacks. When in actuality, in the early 1900s, all the way through the 50s and 60s, the amount of smoking increased dramatically. And the smoking effect on heart disease and on cancer takes many, many years to develop. So it might have taken 20, 30, 40 years. And that's really the basis for this increased amount of heart disease that was being seen in the 50s and 60s. And then, from there, they developed this sort of belief that fat was the enemy. So that's when they changed the dietary guidelines to eliminate most things that contain fat, and created that food pyramid where meat was sort of up at the top, at the point where you should eat that once or twice a week. But everything down at the bottom of that pyramid were the highly processed, highly refined carbohydrate foods that they were thinking was going to actually make you lose weight. And this is utterly preposterous. Your grandparents knew. I'm going to always go back to the grandparents. Your grandparents knew that eating carbs, eating sugary foods was considered fattening foods. Your grandparents knew that eating highly refined complex or not complex carbs, but highly refined processed carbs was going to cause you to gain weight. And yet suddenly the entire medical profession decided to focus on fat and said it was perfectly fine to eat all these refined carbohydrate, which is just utterly ridiculous. So basically, fat was deemed the enemy, was vilified, while sugar and refined carbs got a total free pass. And so what was the result of that? It created a nation that was absolutely hooked on carbs, was sicker than ever, and created this obesity epidemic that we're in right now. So, as an example of this and how money influenced what the medical profession was determining or what the government was allowing was the heart healthy symbol. So that heart healthy symbol was put on a number of different sugary cereals. So the heart healthy stamp, this is crazy, but the heart healthy stamp was placed on Cocoa Puffs and was placed on frosted mini wheats, which we now know, of course, creates huge insulin spikes, causes you to store fat, and creates obesity. So, and the truth of the matter is, over the next, so after the late 70s, for the next decades, what we saw was an increase in heart disease, not a decrease. We saw an increase in heart disease and we saw an increase in obesity. So not only were we seeing an obesity increase because of all the refined sugars and refined carbohydrate, but the dietary fat didn't seem to, like if we decrease the dietary fat and people followed these rules, the number of people, like the amount of a person's diet in terms of percentage went way down in terms of dietary fats and way up in the carbs. They wanted you in the 60 to 70% of your calorie range being these refined processed carbohydrates. And they wanted you to go down from roughly what was about 50% down to about 30% of dietary fats in the American diet during that late 70s period. And the numbers did go down. They looked at the evidence, the amount of people answering surveys and things like that, and they found that people did dramatically alter their diet based on those recommendations. And even though they ate way less dietary fat, we saw no decrease and actually a slight increase in the amount of heart disease. So, we proof's in the pudding right there that, this plan wasn't working. And highly processed foods got a healthy stamp because they were low in fat. And they completely ignored the fact that these were high in sugar, high refined carbs, and making people obese. So the heart healthy symbol was pure marketing, not backed by science. And so what was the real enemy? The real enemy are processed carbs and seed oils, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. So here's another heart healthy stamped cereal is Lucky Charms. So are you trying to tell me that Lucky Charms are heart healthy, but steak and eggs, that's bad? Does that really make sense to you out there? It makes no sense to me. So let's talk about the rigged research, where what happens when big food funds science. And we have to look always. This is so important when you're looking and evaluating any research project or any research study. You have to figure out who's paying for the research, who's actually behind funding the research. Because guess what? When food fund companies fund studies, they suddenly magically favor their products. And when, as another example, when fat was vilified, uh, that created a situation where sugar's role in obesity and heart disease was totally and utterly downplayed. And for decades, we had misleading science keeping people hooked on processed foods. So it's a downright shame that funding can be paid for by big foods to get this sort of stamp of, sort of healthy on certain items, certain foods. This is true of big pharma as well. The medical profession in general is, uh, you know, uh, reliant on big pharma to fund research and to fund all of these things that, then the money influences. And, it's really sad, but, there's something that absolutely has to be done. We as a society, as a community, need to hold people accountable, make the science the basis for what we do and not have it be marketing dollars that determine that. So research should absolutely uh, fund and I'm sorry, research should serve the public health and not benefit corporations and increase corporate profits. So let's talk a little bit about the eat more often myth, why snacking won't help you lose weight. And I kind of touched on this before, but let's talk a little bit about the science of it. So there was this push to eat 6, 7, or even 8 times a day to lose weight. But if we look at the science absolutely refutes this. And the claim was that the more times you eat, not only are you going to decrease the total number of calories, but you're going to actually boost your metabolism. And this boost your metabolism claim was nothing more than a marketing strategy. There was absolutely no science behind it. So clinical studies actually show that increased snacking does not help with weight loss. And also that eating more often, especially when you're eating those refined carbohydrates, keeps the insulin levels high, promoting fat storage. So your body doesn't need constant sources of fuel. It gets what it needs from those glucose and insulin spikes, but your body also will, during times of no calories coming in, will utilize your own body's fat storage as energy. So let's talk about the truth about breakfast and debunking the most important meal of the day theory or myth. So is breakfast truly essential? And the answer is it's only truly essential for cereal companies. The breakfast campaign was absolutely funded by Big Food to sell cereals and breakfast bars. So, as I mentioned before, Kellogg's, General Mills, these were the people, these were the companies behind pushing that breakfast was the most important of the meals of the day. Skipping breakfast absolutely will not ruin your metabolism and will not cause overeating later in the day. And studies have absolutely shown with 100% clarity that intermittent fasting or like simple skipping of the breakfast and increasing the amount of time between eating cycles can be beneficial for weight loss and insulin sensitivity. So honestly, your body doesn't care if you eat breakfast. It's Kellogg's that does. And another thing that's really surprising when you look at some of the studies, they found that the time at which people are least hungry, the least hungry moment of the day is roughly about 8 a.m. So if your body, and here's why, because cortisol levels go up as you prepare for the day. It's not, I know I mentioned that cortisol is a stress hormone, but your body is actually, long before you wake up, your body is preparing for your waking hours. And so cortisol levels go up, which creates a little influx of blood sugar into the bloodstream so that you have energy to take on the day. So you don't actually need to feed yourself in the morning because your body has already done that even a couple hours before you wake up. So there's no need to eat breakfast. And does it make any kind of sense that at 8 a.m. would be the least hungry portion of the day or time of the day? It obviously doesn't make any sense for you to eat breakfast unless you're hungry. If you're hungry, then that's fine. Go ahead and eat a healthy, um, satiating diet, not a diet rich in refined carbohydrates. So let's talk also about the misleading eat more fruits and vegetables message that we got at that time as well. So more fruits and vegetables, sure. That makes perfect sense. And the fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates, but they're whole foods and they come with lots of fiber. They come with protein and fat sometimes. The fruits, not necessarily, but the veggies. And so these are whole foods that take up room in your stomach and stretch those stretch receptors that trigger satiety. And so it makes perfect sense to eat more fruits and vegetables, but what they left out, the most important point of that topic, was they left out what it was replacing. So the real message shouldn't have been just eat more fruits and veggies, but it should be replace those processed foods with more whole foods like fruits and vegetables. So instead of people just adding fruits and veggies on top of an already junk food heavy diet, that's a mistake. So eating more isn't the solution, eating better is. And eating better comes from replacing those processed carbohydrates with whole food carbohydrates, which are much, much better for you. So quality honestly matters way more than the quantity does. And the last thing I'll cover today is the rise of diabetes and when obesity and diabetes collide. So, as I've mentioned in a couple instances and a couple videos prior, obesity and type 2 diabetes are now considered one epidemic, and we lump those two items together into this term called diabetes, where more insulin resistance equals more weight gain, which equals a higher diabetic risk. So, this isn't just about weight, that diabetes and type 2 diabetes, this is metabolic disease. This is very, very unhealthy for the body. It's not that you're just carrying excess fat, it's actual true metabolic breakdown in the body. So, how can a lower carb diet reverse diabetes? So, first of all, lower carbs will generate a lower insulin level, which then allows your body to burn more fat and store less. So remember, in a situation or a state of high insulin, that's a message to your body saying we are getting all this extra energy in and we need to store it. And so it gets stored as either glycogen, which is those glucose units being put together in the liver, or being stored away as fat and being turned into fat. So those glucose molecules, through something called de novo lipogenesis, gets converted into fat, and then that fat is sent out to be stored in the fat cells of the body. So that's in a higher insulin level situation. Well, if you lower insulin, that's now finally allowing your body to burn the energy that you're getting in, that you're taking in through the meal. So in situation with high insulin, you cannot burn fat. It forces the body to store it. And in lower insulin levels, you can actually burn the fat, and it then means you're going to have less fat storage. So studies have absolutely shown that low carb diets improve blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, with even the possibility of reversing type 2 diabetes. So this is a reversible disorder. For years and years and years, physicians, the diabetes associations, all of these so-called experts were saying that type 2 diabetes was a progressive illness that would get worse and worse year after year. And now we know, and doctors are actually promoting and using now, that keto diets and low carbohydrate diets can get patients off of insulin and off of meds. And another thing they're using is intermittent fasting, because intermittent fasting does the same thing, lowers the insulin levels, allowing people to get off their insulin if they're type 2 diabetic and get off of their oral meds as well. So, what is the bottom line? The bottom line is obesity isn't just about calories, it's about hormones. And the primary hormone we always have to pay attention to is insulin. So, have you ever fallen for any of these food myths? If you have, I'd like you to let me know in the comments down below. And I want you to share this with someone who absolutely thinks snacking helps them in their weight loss journey. And we need to teach them, we need to show them that that is absolutely not true. That's marketing, not science. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And as always, like, share, and comment. If you're watching this on any of the social media channels that allow you to subscribe, please subscribe, and you'll get more and more videos every day. Um, and we're going to continue to teach about obesity. We're going to talk about childhood obesity and poverty in the next upcoming videos. We're going to talk all about fat storage and hormone regulation and diets and carbs and all of this good stuff in the future. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.